Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
Content warning ahead. This podcast contains very sensitive topics such as missing persons, unsolved cases, haunted houses, and paranormal activity. These type of topics can contain very upsetting, sensitive details and stories. Please listen responsibly. Welcome to Misty Mysteries, a podcast in the business of ghostly spooks and chilling crimes. I'm your host, Keely, and today is part 2 of my last episode, Celebrities Haunted Just Like Us, which was inspired by the A&E paranormal show Celebrity Ghost Stories, which ran from October of 2008 to April of 2014. In last episode, I covered the haunting of Anna Nicole Smith, Sting, Dan Aykroyd, Vanessa Hudgens, Miley Cyrus, Ariana Grande, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. If you'd like to go listen to that, please don't forget to come back to hear about the other end of it in this episode, the celebrities who decide to have some more fun in the afterlife as ghosts.
Hello, Spooklings.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Kathy.
And we're the hosts of the weekly podcast, All Hallows Eve Podcast.
We are a husband and wife duo with a passion for anything spooky, macabre, and true crime, sprinkled with our own twist of comedy.
We explore topics such as the history of Halloween, the Butcher of Plainfield, Hocus Pocus 2, urban legends, superstitions, and more.
So come join us as we go down the rabbit hole that is All Hallows Eve Podcast.
Listen and follow us at allhallowsevepodcast.com or your favorite podcast provider.
Stay spooky, my friends.
This week is a paranormal episode, but if you know my podcast, you know a lot of times true crime and paranormal tend to run back to back. With at least 2 of the celebrities I'm going to talk about today, that truly seems to be the situation, kicking off with Thelma Todd. Thelma was a well-known actress known by the nicknames the Ice Cream Blonde and Hot Toddy. She appeared in over 100 different movies and short films between the years of 1926 and 1935, before her life was cut short at just 29 years old. In the morning hours of December 16, 1935, Thelma's long-term maid, May Whitehead, found Thelma thumped over in the front of her car with blood around her nose. Her car had been parked inside a garage that belonged to her business partner and on-and-off lover, Ronald West. The investigators very quickly turned to probable foul play with many suspects, like Ronald, her occasional lover and business partner, or his estranged wife, Jewel Carmen, who not only co-owned a cafe with the two, but lived above it. The mobster Lucky Lucino, who had a toxic, abusive relationship with Thelma, who also tried to convince her to allow gambling in her cafe, her ex-husband Pat, who may have felt shame from their divorce, or her mother, the sole heir to Thelma's estate, who announced she was going to build a mansion before Thelma's death with no money to support it. With a long list of suspects, when her death was ruled a suicide by the grand jury from carbon monoxide poisoning, it truly baffled many people. You can find documentaries, articles, and podcasts on her mysterious, untimely death. It leaves you to wonder if her mysterious death could have led to the haunting that many have reported throughout the years. See, after her death, her business partner was only able to keep their cafe open for so long before the speculation around her death took a real hit on the restaurant that was already struggling. He eventually sold the restaurant to a company that kept the restaurant essentially the same, even keeping the furniture that Thelma had picked for the cafe. Keeping her restaurant what it was in life may have fed into the many reports of her ghost roaming the building. Often she was seen at the top of the stairs that led to her apartment, and outside of the building under the arches of the main entrance. Her restaurant was renovated into offices in 2015, leading me to wonder if those working in these spaces see this blonde actress just roaming around, maybe visiting their HR department or scaring some of their bosses. Our next celebrity ghost is George Reeves. He was an actor between 1939 till his death in 1959, and taking a break in his acting career in between when he was drafted into the U.S. Air Force in 1943, though he was quickly changed from his position to entertain his fellow soldiers and make training videos instead of any real fighting. George appeared in many films throughout his career, but he was known best for his role as Superman in The Adventures of Superman, which was his last acting job before he became the victim of a mysterious death. On the night of June 15, 1959, George had been partying with his fiancée Lenore Lamune, a friend Roger who was staying with the couple, and two of his neighbors. George was the first to go to bed that night, so when 1 a.m. of June 16th rolled around and the party was still going, George was over it. This is when he went downstairs to yell at his guest, disturbing his sleep, and went back upstairs. As he returned to his room, Lenore oddly told the party guest he's going upstairs to shoot himself. A sound was heard from upstairs, and she then said, "See, he's opening the drawer to get his gun." And then a single shot rang out from upstairs. Lenore then said, "I told you, he shot himself." When the police arrived on scene, they walked into the room to find George with a gun at his feet and a bullet wound to the head. Lenore was questioned for her comments before his death, but she told police that she was only kidding. Ultimately, the investigators ruled George's death a suicide, but not before obituaries were published and news broke claiming mysterious elements around his death. There is a lot of conspiracies and speculations around George's death. We can't deny the odd factors, especially his fiance's odd comments, but the person who truly refused to believe the police's ruling on George's death was George's own mother, who hired a famous lawyer, Jerry Giesler, to investigate her son's death. Jerry called to have George's fingerprints checked to see if he even pulled the trigger, since this was not done during his autopsy. He also asked for a bullet count on the gun and to look further into the odd bruising on his body. After he asked for this, he just dropped the case, leaving George's mother to wonder if the police were right about her son's death or if there was someone out there living free after ending his life. I think that no matter what happened that night, his life ended. His death was very traumatic. With a traumatic death, it can lead to a haunting. That's why it's no wonder that many have reported seeing George in his old Los Angeles home where his life ended. So after his death, George's ex-wife inherited his home, and she began to rent the home out, but she never seemed to be able to keep tenants in the home. They would report hearing strange noises from George's old bedroom, including that of a single gunshot. Without any explanation, his old room would be found with pillows, sheets, furniture, and clothing moved around, leaving the room in disarray. Then for the star of George's haunting, it's of course himself. The most famous claim is that George will appear in the home in the front lawn, sometimes dressed in his Superman costume. He is even seen standing at the edge of the bed in the bedroom wearing his Superman costume in a pose. I honestly wonder how many of these hauntings are George and how active he is today. Moving on to our next celebrity ghost, we have someone who is definitely a household name just like George and Thelma, and make sure she is not forgotten about in her Beverly Hills mansion. That is Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball starred in many films and shows throughout her 50-year career. She's known best for her star role as Lucy in the 1950s sitcom I Love Lucy, winning 5 Primetime Emmys and a Woman of the Year award in February of 1988. Sadly, her Woman of the Year award came only a year before her death, on April 18th, 1989. On April 18th, Lucille was admitted to a Los Angeles teaching hospital due to chest pains. There, she was diagnosed with a dissecting aortic aneurysm, which she needed surgical intervention to correct. She had a successful 7-hour surgery to repair her aorta and install an aortic valve replacement. And then, just about a week after her surgery, she woke up with severe back pain and then just lost consciousness. At 5:47 a.m. on April 26, 1989, at 77 years old, Lucille Ball passed away from what the doctors determined to be reputed abdominal aortic aneurysm. Lucille was celebrated with 3 memorial services, and she was laid to rest with her mother. Although she was physically laid to rest, when she passed away in her Beverly Hill home, many believed she chose to never leave. Those who knew her reported seeing her around the home even when her husband sold the home, and it was in the process of being completely renovated. One of Lucille's friends wanted to see the home one last time before it looked not like Lucille's home anymore. Walls of the home were missing, and he could see right into Lucille's old room. As he looked, he noticed a tall, slim redhead peering through the fence at what was left of the home. She then turned towards the man, and this is when he noticed it was his friend, Lucille. He reported her looking upset and confused before walking around the corner of the house and disappearing. Home renovations are known for stirring up and upsetting spirits, especially when they were watching their home of 35 years be leveled for something new. Lucille, though, must not have been too upset for too long, because when all was said and done, she decided to stick around the house. Owners of the home since Lucille report strange activities in the attic. One of the most recent owners says that she spends her time rearranging boxes and furniture, making strange noises, and of course, throwing parties for all her spirit friends. Or at least it sounds like she's throwing parties. There are even claims that she may haunt the soundstage where I Love Lucy was filmed, but with not many sightings or stories to back it up. When it does come to haunted TV sets and film sounds, though, our next is known best for reprising his famous movie role in his afterlife. Lon Chaney was an actor and makeup artist in the silent horror movie era. He can be seen in many films from 1917 to 1930, including his most notable The Phantom of the Opera, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and While Sleeping in Paris. His talent to transform his face with makeup earned him the name the Man of Thousand Faces. His face is still often seen today, especially in Universal Studios, in their classic horror film memorabilia and monsters. But Lon himself may still be hanging around Universal Hollywood in the studio tours, of course. After Lon's death on August 26, 1930, from issues related to lung cancer, he was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park. This is the same cemetery Lucille actually was buried before she was moved to a private one with her family, but like Lucille, Lon's spirit may lay to rest there, but his spirit does not. Soundstage 28 was built in 1925, and it saw many different films, including his version of Phantom of the Opera and a film made about him in 1957. Here is where it's believed he haunts in his afterlife. After his death in 1930, strange sights and happenings started in the soundstage. Lights turned on and off, and doors would open and close with no explanation. Most famously, a caped figure, looking a lot like him in his Phantom of the Opera role, is seen running around the catwalk above the stage in stage 28. This historical soundstage was demolished, along with a few others, in 2014, despite petitions to leave it be for many generations to see, but the park is a private property and needed more room for the theme park. They did collect as much of the classic soundstage as possible, maybe to continue using it or saving it for historical purposes. So it makes me wonder, did he move on when it was demolished? Did he move along with the set? Or does he now haunt what I believe is Nintendo World? I can just imagine him riding the new roller coasters and just wondering what the heck this Nintendo is. Maybe a little bit confused. Now, for our last celebrity ghost, he also haunts a studio, but a much different kind. John Lennon was a number of different things, from songwriter, singer, guitarist, and peace activist. He was known best for his musical career with the world-famous band The Beatles, and some of his own solo music, like the song Imagine, the song that haunts my high school choir nightmares. And speaking of hauntings, on December 8th, 1980, John and his wife Yoko were returning home to their apartment at the Dakota Apartments in New York City. While walking into the archway of their building, a man named Mark David Chapman shot off 5 rounds from a revolver at John, hitting him in the back, ending his life at only 40 years old. The killer was a fan of the Beatles who was upset with John's comment that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. He had planned John's murder for months, even taking the time to meet John earlier that night and getting an album signed by him. The killer never planned to do anything after taking John's life, not to hide, not to run. He simply sat at the scene reading a book till the police officers were on scene to arrest him. This was the same book, The Catcher in the Rye, that inspired his murder, he said. Given the mark that the Beatles made and the hold they had on many around the world, John's untimely death was shocking, especially for those closest to him. But they soon found comfort, especially his wife, when his spirit, according to his wife and many of his friends, began to peacefully haunt his apartments in New York, where his life was taken from him. Yoko found great comfort when she saw John sitting at the piano in their apartment building. He then turned to her and told her, "Don't be afraid, I am still with you." Other residents of the building would see him standing in the doorway where he was shot, looking as if he was in deep thought. Though he seems to peacefully haunt or exist in the Dakota, he is a traveling ghost, traveling to record with his bandmates one last time. Before his death, John wrote the song Free as a Bird, and 15 years after his death, the surviving members of the Beatles, Paul McCartney, George Harris, and Ringo Starr, decided to gather together to add their voices to this song. While recording, the men felt like John was in the room with them. They even heard his name as the song faded out, but the photos taken after they recorded the song were the real shock. While John was alive, he told all that were close to him that after his death he would send signs to them through white feathers. Well, while they were taking pictures together after recording the song, a white peacock wandered into their photo. Paul McCartney then said to the other band members, "That's John. Spooky, eh?" It was like John was hanging around. We felt that all the way through the recording. And just like that, I am all out of celebrity ghost sightings for today. If you like the podcast, leaving a review or sharing your favorite episode is the best way to show your love and to help out the podcast. For now, I will see you next week for more ghostly spooks and chilling crimes.